my name is Lisa Bonner, and I am the managing attorney of Bonner Law PC, a New York-based law firm.
Okay, so I wanted to talk to you in regards to the trial because I had multiple strong conversations about how it was impossible to convict an individual on a RICO charge by himself. As a matter of fact, Dave Chappelle, I don't know if you saw that Saturday Night Live, he said, wow, this guy is in a RICO charge by himself. But I want you to break it down about how the United States government, the Department of Justice, is able to do that. And because a lot of people in the community do not believe that he could be convicted on a RICO charge singularly. And I think that I told him it was false, but I want you to break it down as to how the United States government can do that.
Right. Just to clarify, the Department of Justice is not involved in this. This is the Southern District of New York. This is the federal court and located in the Southern District of New York, which is Manhattan, all the way up to Poughkeepsie. So I just want to be clear about that.
Okay.
A RICO charge typically involves more than one co-conspirator. But in this instance, let me just go back for a second. I like to think about a RICO charge like a funnel that you have, you indict a lot of people to get down to that one person, the mob boss, if you will, who is generally the one who is responsible for the bad behavior, right? And so in this instance, they look like they have, well, let me go back a second. So when I say about the funnel, so in this instance, what they probably have done and what they typically do, the government typically does, is they go to people and basically cut a deal with them because they have enough evidence to basically to bring them to trial. Right. So what happens is they go and they start to fish around, right? And they basically say, listen, we've got this evidence against you. And of course, you have the right to go to court and, fight these terms on your own at your own expense, or you can turn evidence against the primary person. In this instance, it would be Sean Combs, and we will cut you a deal, meaning that they will cut a deal for less than, to get some lesser charges or, maybe walk away from it, if you will. So in this instance, we've already seen two people that have come in and who have invoked their Fifth Amendment right to the right against self-incrimination. And then the judge has given them, as we have seen, he's granted them immunity. So they've testified under immunity order. So those would have been people that they would have indicted, undoubtedly, because they were involved in Eddie Garcia's case. He was allegedly involved in the fraud, in the obstruction of justice when he took the money from Combs.
Yes.
And the hotel. That was fraud, and it was obstruction of justice, even though it was not a crime. It was a potential. It was a cover-up of a domestic abuse crime or whatever it is. So, that's obstruction of justice. So that's one instance. The other instance was George Kaplan, I believe. That was one of his assistants came in and testified under the same thing. So these people are basically unindicted co-conspirators, and they've gotten those. I assume that they will have others to come in, and two of the other people that I'm expecting to testify and turn evidence against Sean Combs are the security guard, D-Rock, and Christina Karam. Both of them have been named over 50, 60 times in this particular lawsuit. So that's how they would do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was trying to tell people that I just don't have the legalese to be able to. Thank you for clearing that up. Also, I'm glad you brought that up because he's not charged with domestic violence.
Correct.
But how damaging is it, and how much does it contribute to a possible conviction?
Well, I always
the hotel beatdown.
Right. So let me just say this. I always say that I like to say nobody has a crystal ball, right? Only lawyers, we can just opine and give our opinion on what we think the testimony is and what we think they are doing or not doing. Ultimately, it comes down to the jury. That's it. no matter what is presented, no matter how good the evidence is or how shoddy the evidence is, no matter what, it's going to come down to those 12 jurors in that jury room to decide within the four corners of the law and the indictment and the jury instructions whether or not this person is guilty. So that's the first thing. The second thing I like to say is that the tape is probably, listen, it's damning, obviously.
Yes.
But it proved a couple of things. That one, it proved fraud. So we can just get rid of the domestic violence because that is not a federal charge, and that is not what he is charged with in this indictment. And he's not on trial for domestic violence. So a lot of the domestic violence is a lot of noise, but it is a damning tape in terms of the fact that it did prove, now I can say allegedly or not, but they did have receipts. They had, a money trail and a person who came and testified under an immunity order that looks like he allegedly committed fraud. So that is what the tape is most useful in. The other fact that it's useful, but it's not in terms of what I'm saying about the four corners of the indictment in the four corners of the jury room, is that it's kind of confusing if you look at it from a domestic violence point of view. It shows you what a horrible person he is, but it does show and it does corroborate Cassie's statement. Look, I was trying to get away from a freak off and I was dragged back. So just get rid of the actual what we saw and the kicking and the abusive behavior, and only look at that through the lens of she, meaning Cassie, was saying that I was trying to leave. And the basic element of sex trafficking is through force, fraud, or coercion.
Yes.
When a person is being dragged back against their will, that is not consensual. And in every
almost
sexual,
proves kidnapping, almost, or something like
no,
that.
kidnapping is, well, it could, but he wasn't charged for that because
Right.
she went back into the room and she stayed on her own free will.
Okay.
But it does show that I was dragged back and I was trying to get away. So I was forced back into that room. And, but the one thing that I have had several conversations about with people about is the consent part of her and part of me and part of everybody who, not only the people who were allegedly sexually abused by Combs, but the people who were working for him, and, about how they stayed in his orbit, no matter how abusive, horrible, violent he allegedly was. There was just something charismatic they thought about him. And, once you are, and many of the people talked about this, and once you are subjected to this type of behavior, it almost becomes normalized. And so the one thing that we're talking about in the consent issue is in implicit and explicit in every sexual relationship, in every sexual encounter, is consent on your own free will, without any stipulations, without you holding anything over my head. That is what consent is, on my own free will, not but for this. It is, are you consenting unequivocally without any coercion? That's it. And so when I likened Diddy's behavior the other day to a pimp, that's when people, they say, oh, well, he paid for her house. Okay, but she kept saying, I don't want to do this. And he's saying, if you don't do this, I will not pay for that. That is not your own free will. Just like when you have a pimp and a prostitute, a prostitute is able to go out and prostitute her own body on her own. Now, it's still against the law.
Right.
But if she chooses to do that, she is doing that, and she is getting into a consensual relationship with a John, right? Period. You're paying me, I'm paying you. We're going to have sex for money, irrespective of that's illegal. We are doing this on our own free will. Now, when a pimp gets involved, she is still going and doing the same thing, but she is being controlled by another person. You do this, or I will break your knees. I
Right.
will beat your behind, or what have you.
Right.
So it's not the same thing. She can do it on her own free will with the John, but when somebody else is making her do that and bringing them money and bringing them whatever other kind of satisfaction, that is the same type of behavior that Diddy is in. He just paid for her house. He was paying for it, but she kept saying, listen, I love you. I want to do, we had a love contract. This is me and you consenting. But every time I kept saying I didn't want to do it, you were threatening my house. That is pimp like behavior.
Exactly. Exactly. Before I get into how this case is going to change the paradigm, because we have these flashpoints, these zeitgeists, such as the Me Too movement and Weinstein and Cosby and on, R. Kelly. I wanted to find out from you, or just just to opine just for a moment. Do you believe that the prosecution is doing, and it's hard to ask attorneys this. Do you think they're doing a good job of establishing that there might have been RICO, sex trafficking, prostitution across state lines?
There are 5 different counts. There's one count of RICO, which includes sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, that states that Diddy allegedly used his commercial and human resources of his business to protect his reputation, conceal his conduct for the purposes of sex trafficking. That is the RICO charge. Now, under the RICO charge, there are 35 different predicate crimes that one would be engaged in one or more times to establish a pattern. So under those predicate crimes, we have alleged in this indictment weapons charges, narcotics with the intent to distribute, the possession of narcotics with the intent to distribute, arson, kidnapping, forced labor, fraud, extortion, and the like.
It's just a lot. It's a lot.
That's the RICO charge. So what the prosecution has proven beyond a reasonable doubt are the predicate crimes in terms of extortion. There shows money. There is a money trail that he extorted $20,000 from Cassie's parents. She took out a home equity loan and he paid it back. That is not refuted. Forced labor. That is several instances of people saying that they have worked hundreds of hours with no sleep. Some of them have gotten stress-induced alopecia. Others have gotten, one of them got vertigo or something like that, where we're ringing in the ears and dizzy and all the things sound like vertigo to me.
Another tract infections.
Right. And another person stated that they had to be hydrated and they were treated in the urgent care or something with respect to that. So that's forced labor. Kidnapping, we have very strong allegations. Now, they're circumstantial, but there are allegations that he did kidnap and take against the will Capricorn Clark.
Yes.
Now that's circumstantially, but people have been convicted on circumstantial evidence that is less than that.
If it's strong enough, yes.
Yes. So we have bribery is another predicate crime under that, which we have proven that he bribed the security officer and paid that $100,000. Arson, although it's circumstantial, it's pretty strong. I tell you I'm going to blow up your boyfriend's car, and then the car blows up. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people. I don't know. I mean, maybe other people do. I don't know anybody who has had their car blown up. So, let's just start there.
Right.
Let alone somebody telling you it's going to blow up and then it blows up. So that's pretty heavy on the circumstantial part. Weapons, well, we saw that he was in possession of sawed-off or AR-15 weapons and with the serial number scratched off.
Yes.
All of that. The possession of narcotics with the intent to distribute, well, he was already arrested. If you just look at what they recovered from his room when he was arrested, he had a bunch of narcotics in there under the name of Frank Black. And Frank Black was the person, the alias that he used in various states and various hotel rooms.
Right.
And also people have stated that, listen, over and over again, you plowed me with drugs. And I tell people all of the time that possession of narcotics with the intent to distribute does not mean the fact that you are selling these. You
Right,
can give
right.
them
It's not
away,
like they were the
right?
black
Right.
mafia
You can give that away.
Right, right.
So they've pretty much proven that. So if we go down and you only need two predicate crimes, well, I just gave you the unrefuted evidence, at least five of those crimes, and on a pattern that we've shown infinite times. And they've also demonstrated that he has used commercial or human resources from his company. He paid, allegedly paid Cassie's mother back out of the Combs enterprise, and that shows the money that the CFO Derek Ferguson alleged and showed that transaction. So yes, on the RICO charge, I think that they've proven that. Now, what's going to turn on is the consent part that we've already talked about. And so the two other counts are sex trafficking on a standalone basis by force, fraud, or coercion with Cassie Ventura and victim number two, Jane, and two counts of transportation for the purposes of prostitution. Well, they pretty much shown that.
Yes, absolutely.
And no matter what anybody says, oh, prostitution happens all the time, it doesn't matter. It's still illegal. So it's speeding.
Right.
It doesn't matter if everybody goes to jump off a bridge, or you're going to do it too. It's still illegal.
Right.
No
people people jaywalk all the time. It's still illegal.
Yeah, exactly. Doesn't matter. So those are the things. And when I'm saying the jury instructions, and you look, so yesterday I was having a conversation with a friend, and I pulled up the statute of coercion under New York law. And I read that to that person, and I was like, okay, so this is part of the jury instructions that they are going to use. What is the definition of force, fraud, or coercion under the New York statute? And they're going to look at that. And so and that's going to be in the jury instructions. So and she's like, oh, okay, well, when you read it like that, and it's, again, sexual, it's implicit, explicit in every sexual encounter is free will without any stipulations. Again, when you look at prostitution, it's illegal from a state standpoint, but the two people are consenting.
Absolutely. So my last question before I let you go, and I thank you for taking the time to speak with us. This has been very educational and edifying. I wanted to find out, or just your perspective of how this will, I don't know, from a legal standpoint or process standpoint, change how the interaction between in the entertainment industry, just like with the Me Too movement, what's going to change in the music industry or entertainment industry as a result of this, or what has already changed because of this? They're calling it the trial of this century.
Well, that's a good question. And I think one of the things that has come out of the Me Too movement, and we've heard Mia and Cassie and Jane all talk about, is the fact of, this happened before I had any, who would believe me, right? The same thing with Harvey Weinstein. Who would believe me if I went and said this? I mean, we've already talked about, and they alleged on the stand how Diddy allegedly had people in his corner that he would pay off. Okay, so you allege this. Okay, so the people witnessed it, but he would pay them off. So I'm hoping that it will allow women to have more voice over their agency, and no means no, and understanding that, the days of feeling like you have to do something, a quid pro quo relationship, especially something that makes you feel a certain way,
right?
It's not, that we don't have to put up with that any longer. And I do believe that, I know that the Me Too movement is what allowed Cassie to file her lawsuit, because it was filed.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. because this happened so long ago, and you have the statute of limitations, which had run out. However, after the Me Too movement, California and New York, they opened the window again for the adult survivors of sexual assault. California was a 3-year window. New York was a 1-year window.
Okay. Okay.
And so that's how she was able to do that. And allegedly, she was in negotiations with Sean and Sean's people up until the time of
That
the
she filed the
date
lawsuit. Yeah.
before the statute closed. And, he said, no, I'm not going to pay you. And when that statute of limitations, they filed it on the last day, the very last day before the window closed. And that's how she was able to file this. And I dare say that if he had just given this girl her money, none of this would have ever
None of
happened.
this.
And so what happened is, after that, a lot of people came and were filing, civil suits. And most of these people had not met each other. And in today's testimony, for one, we heard Jane stating that she had met Cassie once or twice only in passing. They'd never had a conversation. But when Cassie filed her lawsuit, she basically was texting Combs, and this is the testimony as of today, Monday, June 9th, is that I felt like I was reading my own trauma. That's what she said. Like, you've been here before, like, and you're re-victimizing me, and you've done the same thing to me. And so I think that Jane is going to be a really key linchpin in this, because again, there was no violence. And, and I'm saying this because no matter what you think about Cassie or what have you,
Right.
no woman should be subjected to that. No person should
Nobody.
be subjected to that
It was
level
basically
of
sex
violence.
slavery.
Yes. And just to the beating that people witnessed on tape that he denied until CNN obtained the coverage, nobody believed her. But I read the indictment, and my first job out of law school was with the battered women's shelter of East LA. And I had a lot of training in, victimization and victim trauma, and understanding how people hold this over their head and abuse these women, for their own gratification. And so when you're reading something as specific as that, not only that, she had a lot of corroboration that was, 90% of her claims were able to be corroborated.
Right, right.
No woman in their right mind wants to be famous for that type of sexual violence and sexual exploitation, of forcing them to have sex with hundreds of male sex workers.
Yeah.
No, there is a level of depravity that people are saying, and just because it doesn't happen, it never happened to you, and just because you don't understand it doesn't mean that it did not happen. And I just tell people all the time, be thankful that you have the ability to walk away. This girl was 19. She was being groomed. This behavior did not take place with Jennifer Lopez, because she had her own. Young Miami, she had her own. So by the time he's dealing with people who are equally yoked, this behavior does not come into play. J-Lo was like, I'm out of here after that first gun incident. I believe it was the one with Shine. She was like, okay, this is not me. And she walked away.
Yes,
Young Miami, the same thing. These people had their own money. So you're grooming a 19-year-old girl. If you double 19, that's 38, right? So the man was 37. So basically he was twice her age. He was like, what do you call your grandfather? She's like, Pop, call me that. That is sick.
Right.
So I invite people to look at somebody who's just graduating from high school. That person is 18 years old. Do you think a freshman in college who's really, a freshman age girl, if you will, would have the wherewithal to understand, especially somebody who's just, trying to be a singer. She doesn't have any real education to fall back on or anything like that. So I just urge people to be a little bit more thoughtful in their responses, in their thought process, because nobody wants, there's not enough money in the world. $130 million is not enough for Cassie to really relive that trauma and the horrible things that she endured. And and again, he's innocent until proven guilty, but some things are irrefutable that
Right.
they've talked about. And so there you have it. I just, I think that it's something that we need to be very mindful of. Of course, he's been, accused of some horrific crimes, and that's why I'm granting these interviews, because I want people to understand from a legal perspective what they're talking about. Well, I don't see RICO. Well, can you define RICO for me? No, I mean, well, then until you read the indictment and until you're familiar with what the law is, let's not have this conversation when you don't know what the RICO statute is and how and what it reads and what consent is under the law. Let's talk about that. I'm happy to have a debate with anybody. And again, I'm not the judge nor the jury.
Right.
I'm just here to connect the legal dots. But it don't tell me that, oh, it's just being on trial for freaky behavior. Yeah, that's not it.
Absolutely.
It's not it.
Absolutely.
And even the defense had to change their strategy, because that's what they were going to come forth with. These are, you had a swinging lifestyle, and but once they heard Cassie's 2 days of testimony, they were like, hold on, before we even get on the cross-examining her, we need a second. We need to change up our defense strategy.
Yeah, they had to regroup. They had to regroup after that. That was key. So I am looking forward to, and I hope that when the trial ends, I know you're going to have a number of interviews. I hope that we can reconnect after the trial's over, so that we can kind of look back on what it is, and then kind of say some of the things in our opinions that we want to say now, but we want to wait until the trial is over.
Correct. Yeah.
So I look forward to speaking with you again, and thank you so much for taking time to speak with me.
Thank you for a thoughtful time.
Absolutely. You take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.